Rain whispered against the cracked window, tracing faint silver lines down the glass. The sky outside was a dull gray bruise, the kind that pressed down on the city until even hope felt damp. Inside, the apartment was a cramped square of flickering light and quiet struggle. The hum of the old refrigerator filled the silence, and a single bulb swayed slightly from the ceiling, casting uneven shadows over the peeling wallpaper. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, elbows on his knees, staring at the worn-out $5 bill between his fingers. He turned it over again and again like maybe, by some miracle, it would multiply. His hands were rough from work that no longer paid, his nails chipped, and beneath his eyes hung the heavy darkness of too many sleepless nights. Rent was due soon, and the stack of unpaid bills on the counter seemed to mock him with their sharp red letters. Across the room, little Emily sat cross-legged on the couch. Her doll, a patchwork of mismatched fabric and buttons for eyes, rested in her lap. She was humming softly, a tune Daniel didn't recognize but had heard her make up before when she tried to keep herself busy. The sound of her small voice almost broke him. She deserved more than this, more than a cold room, more than reheated noodles and worn shoes. Her voice, fragile but clear, drifted through the air. "Daddy." He lifted his eyes, tired but gentle. "Yeah, baby." She hesitated, her fingers tracing the doll's threadbare dress. "Do you think God forgot us?" Daniel froze. The words hit him with a kind of quiet violence he hadn't been ready for. Out of everything she could have said, out of every question he could have prepared himself for, it was that one that unraveled him. He blinked slowly, feeling something heavy rise in his throat. He tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. "No, sweetheart. God doesn't forget people." Emily's little brow furrowed. "Then why is it so hard all the time? Why don't we ever have enough like other families?" Her voice cracked, and Daniel could see the shimmer of unshed tears in her eyes. She looked down, embarrassed, clutching her doll close. He wanted to tell her it was going to be okay. He wanted to tell her that things would get better soon. But he had said that too many times already, and each time, the world had refused to listen. He stood, crossed the small room, and knelt beside her. "Hey," he whispered, brushing a lock of her hair from her face. "Look at me." She did, reluctantly, her lower lip trembling. "God hasn't forgotten us," he said again, softer this time, as if saying it quietly might make it more true. "Sometimes, he's just waiting to see how strong we can be." Emily frowned, small hands twisting in her lap. "But I'm tired of being strong, Daddy." Her voice cracked in the middle, and that was it, his heart broke completely. He pulled her into his arms, pressing his face into her hair, and held her as if holding on could keep the world from slipping away. "Me too," he whispered, eyes stinging. "Me too, baby girl." Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far off, low and mournful. The rain grew heavier, rattling against the windowpane like impatient fingers. The room dimmed further as clouds swallowed the last trace of daylight. Emily soon drifted to sleep in his arms, her breathing slow and soft. Daniel laid her gently on the couch, covering her with the old blanket that smelled faintly of soap and thyme. He stood there for a long moment, just watching her, her tiny chest rising and falling, the doll clutched tight against her. She looked peaceful, untouched by the storm that raged both outside and inside him. He turned back to the table, where the bills sat like silent judges. Electricity, rent, late fees. He picked one up and rubbed his thumb over the red final notice stamp. The paper trembled in his hand. He didn't know what to do anymore. The factory had let him go 2 months ago, downsizing, they'd called it, as if the word made it less cruel. He'd tried everything since then. Day labor, deliveries, fixing things for neighbors, even odd jobs that barely covered food. He was a man trying to stay afloat with an anchor around his neck. That night, he didn't sleep. The rain kept falling, and the clock on the wall ticked in slow, merciless rhythm. He sat by the window, the faint glow of streetlights painting half his face in pale gold. Emily murmured in her sleep once, reaching out with a small hand. He caught it, squeezed gently, then let go. He whispered into the dark, "No, God didn't forget us, but maybe he's waiting for me to move." He stood, grabbed his old jacket from the hook by the door, and slipped outside. The air hit him cold and sharp, the kind of cold that stung your lungs when you breathed too fast. The streetlights shimmered in puddles as he walked, his shoes soaking through in minutes. He didn't know exactly where he was going, only that he couldn't stay still anymore. Each step felt heavy, but also strangely purposeful. He passed shuttered stores, old houses with glowing windows, the distant sound of a siren echoing down the street. The city was asleep, but he was wide awake, fueled by something desperate and stubborn. Then he saw it, the small diner on the corner. The one where he'd once fixed a back door for a free meal. Its neon sign buzzed weakly in the rain, open 24 hours, the only spot of light on the block. He pressed his hand against the glass door, looked through the foggy pane, and saw a woman behind the counter, middle-aged, tired eyes, counting money into the register. He pushed the door open. The bell above it gave a thin, metallic jingle. "We're closed, hun," the woman said without looking up. Daniel wiped rain from his face. "I saw your sign," he said. His voice came out rough. "You still need a dishwasher." She looked up now, studying him. His clothes were soaked, his face drawn. She hesitated. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." He gave a faint smile. "Probably longer. But I can work." Something softened in her eyes. She nodded toward the kitchen. "Start now if you want. I could use the help." He exhaled, a breath that felt like release, like something shifting inside him. "Thank you," he said simply. By the time morning came, his hands were red from the hot water, and his back ached like he'd carried the whole night on it. But he didn't care. In his pocket was $40, small, crumpled, real. When he got home, the sun was peeking through the clouds, painting the walls in gentle light. Emily was still asleep, her face half buried in her pillow. Daniel set a pan on the stove, cracked the last 2 eggs they had, and cooked slowly, carefully. The smell of butter filled the air. When she woke, blinking against the light, she saw the table set with pancakes and syrup. Her eyes widened. "Daddy, did God send us breakfast?" Daniel turned from the stove, smiling. "Maybe he did," he said. "But he made me his delivery guy." Emily giggled, her laughter warm and bright in the small kitchen. And as he sat with her, watching her eat with joy that seemed too big for her tiny body, Daniel felt something shift deep inside, a quiet certainty that maybe faith wasn't about waiting for miracles. Maybe it was about standing up in the rain and becoming one. Winter arrived like a slow ache. The kind that crept under the doors, slipped through thin walls, and made even breathing feel like work. The city wore a coat of frost, its edges blurred by fog and the smoke of distant chimneys. But inside the small diner where Daniel now worked, there was warmth, the kind made not by money or miracles, but by effort, routine, and something that felt a lot like quiet grace. Every morning before dawn, Daniel pushed open the back door, the bell chiming softly in greeting. He'd shrug out of his heavy jacket, hang it on the hook near the mop closet, and tie his apron. The rhythm of his days had become steady, washing dishes, mopping floors, carrying crates of supplies, each motion grounding him in purpose. It was hard work, but he didn't complain. Not once. He'd glance out the small kitchen window sometimes, watching the sky shift from black to purple to gold as the city woke up. He liked that moment, when the world seemed to hold its breath, when he could almost believe the universe hadn't forgotten anyone at all. And when his shift ended, he'd hurry home, his breath a white mist in the air, clutching a paper bag with whatever food the diner owner, Mrs. Hayes, had insisted he take. For Emily, she'd say every time, waving away his thanks. Kids need more than hope. They need warm meals. At home, Emily would be waiting by the window, her red shoes tapping against the wooden floor, her face lighting up the second she saw him. She'd run to the door, shouting, "Daddy," and throw her arms around his waist. He'd lift her up, her laughter filling the small space like music. Life was still hard, the bills didn't stop coming, and the heater still coughed more than it hummed, but it was better. The sharp edge of fear had dulled, replaced by something steadier. Daniel had stopped counting what they lacked and started noticing what they still had. One afternoon, after picking Emily up from school, they walked past a small park dusted in snow. Children were building lopsided snowmen, their laughter rising into the crisp air. Emily stopped suddenly, tugging at his hand. "Daddy, look," she whispered. Near the bench, a boy about her age sat alone, his knees pulled up to his chest. He wore a thin jacket, no gloves, and his lips trembled from the cold. Daniel slowed, watching him. "You know him?" She shook her head. "No, but," he looked sad. They approached quietly. Emily knelt down beside the boy. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. The boy wiped his nose with the back of his hand. I'm fine, he muttered, though his voice cracked. Emily frowned. You're cold. The boy hesitated, then whispered, my mom's working late. She forgot to give me lunch money. Daniel felt his chest tighten. It was such a small sentence, but it held too much weight, too much of what he'd lived himself. Emily looked up at him, her big brown eyes pleading. Daddy, can we help him? Daniel's instinct was to reach for his wallet, a wallet that still carried more worry than bills. He hesitated. Money was still tight, every dollar mattered. But then he thought of that night in the rain, of Emily's question, do you think God forgot us, and how he'd promised her through action that they were not invisible. He smiled gently. Yeah, baby, we can help. They walked to the corner store, the bell over the door jingling as they entered. Daniel bought a sandwich and a small carton of chocolate milk. When they returned, Emily handed it to the boy, who looked up in surprise. This is for you, she said. My dad says when you help someone, God smiles. The boy's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. Thank you, he whispered. As they walked home, Emily's hand slipped into her father's. She was quiet for a while, her little boots crunching in the snow. Then she said, Daddy, maybe God didn't forget us after all. Maybe he was just waiting for you to believe again. Daniel looked down at her, the soft pink of her cheeks, the light in her eyes. He smiled, a slow, deep kind of smile that came from somewhere real. You might be right, sweetheart. Days turned into weeks, and the diner became more than just a job, it became a kind of family. Daniel's hard work didn't go unnoticed. Mrs. Hayes would often watch him from behind the counter, the way he never rested, how he always found something to fix, something to clean, someone to help. One evening, after closing, she called him over. Sit down, Daniel, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. He frowned, confused. Something wrong. Nothing at all, she said, smiling. You've been working harder than anyone I've ever hired. The customers like you. You make this place better. I want you to take on a new role, assistant manager. Better pay, steadier hours. He stared at her, unable to speak for a moment. Are you serious? As serious as a heart attack, she said, laughing. You've earned it. Emotion welled in his throat. He nodded slowly, his voice rough. Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. You don't know what this means. She waved a hand. I think I do. Now get home to that little girl. She's probably waiting by the window again. That night, Daniel took the long way home just to breathe. Snowflakes fell softly, glowing gold under the streetlights. He could feel the cold on his face, but it didn't bite the way it used to. It almost felt like a blessing, sharp, real, reminding him he was alive. When he opened the door, Emily was indeed by the window, drawing pictures with crayons on scraps of paper. She looked up immediately. Daddy. He crouched down and handed her a small paper bag. Got something for you. She opened it, eyes widening at the sight of 2 slices of chocolate cake. Cake, she gasped. What's the occasion? He smiled, kneeling beside her. Daddy got a promotion today. Her face lit up like sunrise. Really? You're the boss now. Something like that, he said with a chuckle. She leapt forward, wrapping her arms around his neck so tightly he could barely breathe. See, I told you. God didn't forget us. He hugged her back, closing his eyes against the sting of tears. No, baby, he whispered. He never did. He just wanted us to remember others too. They sat together at the small table, splitting the cake with 2 forks, laughing between bites. The heater buzzed in the corner, and outside, snow kept falling, gentle and endless. For the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't think about bills or worry about tomorrow. He just watched his daughter smile, her cheeks smeared with chocolate, her laughter filling the room. In that moment, he understood something simple and profound, that faith isn't only about waiting for help from above. Sometimes it's about moving your hands, your feet, your heart. It's about choosing kindness when the world gives you reasons not to. And as Emily looked up at him and said, Daddy, I'm proud of you, Daniel realized that he had answered her first question at last, not with words, but with action. God hadn't forgotten them. He'd simply given Daniel the strength to remember who he was meant to be.